Good evening and welcome to the Monmouth City Council meeting for Tuesday, August the 21st. And I'll call the meeting to order. And with that, we'll do a roll call, please.
Councillor Belts. Here. Councillor Carey.
Here.
Councillor Johnson.
Here.
Councillor Sharmer. Here. Councillor Schinkel.
Here.
Councillor Silbernagel is excused, and Mayor Milligan.
Here. Would you all please rise and join me in the flag salute? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That's probably alerting the police department. I'm going to stomp on it, see if they get action. That's alerting the police department right there. There we go.
So we're at the consent calendar, and tonight that consists of approving the minutes from the council meeting of August 7th and the minutes from the council work session of August 7th.
Mr. Mayor, I have just a minor correction. It's editorial. I don't think it requires bringing it off the consent calendar. But on page 2 of 3 on the work session, one of the people that's speaking regarding sidewalks identified as Dan Cannon. That was Dale Cannon.
Yes.
So just a minor editorial credit there. And with that, I'd move approval of both with as corrected.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, like sign? And the consent calendar is passed. So for the mayor's report, I want to update you. We sent off the documents to get Western Independence Monmouth PEG channel organization changed from ORS 190 to a 501c3. The final documents were sent in, well, we sent documents in March. There were some corrections on the documents. We resent them in this last week, so we should know in about 3 weeks if we have the 501c3 status for WMPEG. And then I attended the city picnic, was really well attended. I suggested that Phyllis figure out a way to make sure that in future it's not the hottest day of summer that they have the city employee picnic. But the last 3 years it seems like that's been the case. Maybe it's because they're just the hottest summers on record, but. And then another item, Dan Cruz has applied to be a member of the Budget Committee, and I'd like to recommend his appointment. So is there anyone who'd like to?
Make a motion?
Yes.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded to accept Dan Cruz to the Budget Committee. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right. Then we'll get a letter out to Dan. And now we come to the reports for council representatives of boards and commissions. And tonight we've got a report from Councilor Johnson.
Yeah, we had a meeting August the 1st, Historic Commission, and the main concern was that, and it's been put in our weekly report, is they were trying to pick out a place to put the sign in the city park over here by the amphitheater. And they had 3 or 4, maybe 5 locations, and then they were going to consult with Parks and Recreation and with Russ from the Public Works to see where the best place would be, and that was the basic meeting. Thank you.
All right. And with that, are there any community announcements? Hearing none, we'll move to the city manager's report. Scott?
Yep, first thing, if you can grab your quarterly reports, this is the ending report for the year 2017-18. I'll go ahead and touch on the main goals like we normally do, and then actually flip through some of the departments just to highlight some of those items. Under city council goals, the additional street funding, key thing they were going to shift to focusing on stormwater utility, and we're about ready to get an RFP ready to get that one out on the street so we can get a consultant to work on that. The power and light building is dated as of here, but they actually got forms being made right now for the foundation on that, so they got right on top of that. City Hall, no activity there. The UGB expansion, we had a good discussion at the last council meeting on where we are, and we'll keep proceeding with that. That's a long process, but we'll keep making progress on it. And then ODOT plan for Highway 99, the utility phase is substantially complete, and then ODOT will be coming in the day after Thanksgiving, Labor Day. That'd be a long time to start this.
Yeah, we quite a while on that.
Yeah, and the key thing for citizens is ODOT has a website that keeps track of it. We'll be triggering links off of ours too. We'll be coordinating with them on our Facebook page. And so what's supposed to be, most of the focus is evening work, but there can be some disruptions during the day, but it's not going to be, shouldn't be full closures. It should be disruptions like maybe you can't go down a certain street, or they might do some lane changes a little bit, but most of the traffic should flow through there. That's at least their intent. Then, if you can flip page, go to the next one, we get to Public Works. Marion County well number 1 filtration. Like I said, we got those going. They're doing a little bit of technical design work. When they got them in there and the way they had them set, we were not too sure we could have got the filters out to replace them. So that was kind of a design issue. So we went back to the architect or engineer, I guess, to get that worked on. The water line relocation work that we just know, that was a huge project. That really took a lot of their time this summer. Sewer system, we got a dechlorination system. As you remember, we chlorinate to kill things, but then chlorine's not good for the stream, so then you dechlorinate to get it back there. We've got a good system in place right there. Go to the following page. Just a note there, the transportation fee development, we're not focusing on that at this moment. That's why we have a hold on that one. Then, if you go to the next page, building, big one was getting our e-permitting software going. We're still working through those issues and how it's working, but the nice one is it's got all sorts of other modules with it. So Public Works, Power and Light can track things. It's a lot more robust than just a building permit system. Then community development, Councilor Johnson just talked about historic, the walking tour enhancements. Interesting note, Barbara Hogan, our senior center director, went over to Dallas Retirement Village for a little fair the other day. The most popular item on that was the historic walking tour map. All the people in Dallas were like, oh my gosh, we're going to come over and do that. Next page, as we mentioned there, just the land use and housing elements, work that Suzanne's doing. Under finance, just what I want to know is down at the bottom, Mitel phone system conversion. That was a surprise, and we adapt quickly sometimes, but that we were told in March that we need to actually switch our phone system out. And so got everything figured out. We seamlessly went over, and we actually have a system that should be a little bit more functional and basically the same price as the old one. But that's always one of those nice projects that if you don't complete, you don't have phones. So that became a priority. Next page. Kind of more of a back office, but down at the bottom was Cassell, which is our software system for finances inventory module. We've done a lot of it manually, or people had their own systems. Now we actually have a centralized system that we can put everything into. And then a key thing there, like when we get to audit time, it's more just grab, and you're done, instead of having to take other systems and reintegrate them back into other documents. So that'll be a nice enhancement. Nothing much on page 7. If you go to 8, down at the bottom, big one, obviously the Power and Light headquarters. And then same thing, the Highway 99 project, all the work that we had to do there. And proceeding to 9, just an update on the senior center. Yeah, we're still going forward with the scout group that's going to work on this right now. They're trying to get kind of final details, get the architect back involved and how to tie it in back to the building. And then if everything goes right, that would be a spring project at this point. Then page 10, under police, the hire and train new officers. We're getting close. We got one person coming out of academy pretty soon. We're getting in good shape there. Reserves officers has been very nice. We actually had a couple that we just got through, and we actually just acquired 2 more, so we're doing really good on reserves right now. So that's pretty nice. And then the last page, kind of library, and I just kind of wanted to highlight technology. And so we have the photocopier, internet computers, staff computers, and it's a lot of what a library is. It's the ability to get to information, how you use it, making it responsive for our citizens to have systems that are in place there, and the library is always doing something. So with that, I entertain any questions now or later.
Well,
Yeah, I got one. I think on page 7. Anyhow, what's the deal with the Cassell that won't allow to use electronic time cards? It just won't function, or payroll data, input reduction, electronic time cards instead of hand doing it?
We're still sorting through that, and what happens is Cassell's really robust. It does a lot of good things. But in our case, in Oregon, with some of the calculations, including PERS and some different things, it doesn't work that well. And so we found out was we contacted a lot of Oregon cities that have Cassell and said, are you using that piece for the timesheets? And most people are not. It's just, it's not that functional. So I think what we need to look at is, can we find a standalone that would patch into that? But we can get some really, really good time savings if we could go electronic. But we
Right,
need to
well,
find
that
the
was
right
one of the
system.
big deals when we took the
Oh,
cell.
absolutely. Yeah,
was
we were really hoping that
electronic
would be there, and
typing.
it just hasn't worked.
Any other questions? John?
Go ahead, Byron.
On the city hall, Scott, so we're at the stage right now of a space study? Is that where we are?
Yeah, so basically, I need to do an RFP that would invite people, we'd pick somebody that then would look at the buildings. And so part of it's how much space do you need, how to configure, kind of core options are you take the city hall building that's there, expand it, reconfigure, clean up, remodel, kind of like what the high school did on their last one. Do you start from scratch and just, start over something? And then the other consideration points to this building is, do you leave this as a standalone like it is, or do you try to push it back into a main building so we're all in one place?
And so when, your best guesstimate is when we can expect that study to be completed and presented?
I'd say still a few more months. I'm under the gun with the personnel rules to get that done, to meet that, so that's kind of my focus. But yeah, this one, or I can try to get this one cleared out and then at least, have the lag time to get proposals back and everything, get somebody started, so, but, yeah.
And John?
I looked at one of the goals we set, a year ago in February, was to work on the completion of the Power and Light building, or the Power and Light building project. And there's like 3 dates and at least 2 different stages of completion. And I don't know whether there's different segments of that or whatever, because
I know that the building one, they take a different perspective because they take a focus on like the plan review side of it, so there's a little different there. And then, so I usually try to integrate really what comes from kind of the main department and try to line those up. But sometimes we do have like 3 different departments, and then I usually try to scan through, and I must not have caught that one, so.
Yeah, well, additionally, I think we can, of course, this is the last of this. We could finally get rid of that Highway 51 bike ped improvements project. That's no longer.
Oh, yeah.
But this is the final.
Yeah, so what you'll see each year when we do this is, going forward, anything that's complete or isn't relevant anymore will go away, and then the next one, you'll have a fresh set of projects.
Yeah, but we have the 17-18 goals here. Over there, we've got the 18-19 goals.
Yeah, this was last year. So this was the 17-18.
I understand, and we've got, the best we've done is 60%, and we've put that one on hold. I mean, if we're going to get to these, how are we ever going to get to those?
That's a challenge.
Because I think that needs to be a consideration, so we don't bite off, in those goal-setting sessions more than what we can chew. And we may need to, I'm just suggesting to other counselors that we may want to think a little bit more about what is still backlogged, assuming that we're going to go this way. And I'm disappointed that and I know that 5% towards determining an approach for City Hall upgrade. That's probably a low number, but we're sure as hell not going to get it done by the projected completion date. Just an observation. I know this is hard, and you take it from other areas and you have to meld it into something, but one of the things we're measured on as counselors is how well we do on getting our goals.
Right. And I have to say one thing, we're aggressive with these goals, we're fairly optimistic. There's a whole lot of these things we probably could back down. And, as you see from every single department, no one ever gets all their things done. Hardly. That doesn't take into account all the intervening things that happen during the year and all the new issues that come up. And I think that's one interesting one. We seem to have a lot of extra issues that come up during the year.
I get that.
Roxanne, you have a question?
Well, should council be reviewing the goals on a more than annual basis then, so that we can keep these a little bit more, I'm not talking about what staff is reporting, but I'm saying, should we be looking at our goals a little bit differently rather than every 12 months?
Well, it's every quarter. We actually review that project to address it every quarter. So like John says, maybe we need to bring it more out at the quarters, but we're not letting it go from February to February.
That's exactly what I'm saying, is why are we going February to February if clearly we need to be discussing it more, and bringing
Yeah,
it up.
and so
to
I
the
think the idea, I think they hit is that you do the once a year, and then, but then we have quarterly updates so we can see how we're doing.
And
Well, so,
Laurel,
I have a question.
okay.
We're only 50% done on the employee handbook. Are we at risk of being dinged on the audit again because of this?
Good. Yeah, I'm under the gun on that
And it's
one.
an important document. Should we be turning this over to an intern?
No.
At
Should
this
an
point,
intern be working on such an important document?
They are?
It says here, intern develop side-by-side comparison of old and new
Yeah,
handbooks.
that was previous, and so then it's my job to go through and verify. It's a couple of times you have one section, there's like two options, we need to make sure which is the best one. Nice one there, though, it's all mapped out, so it's a matter of going through and just making sure. And in our case, the intern we had working on it had worked in personnel departments for a number of years and did personnel rules, handbooks, all levels. So
Okay.
I didn't take somebody
It
who
would be
had no
really nice to have a clean audit.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay, all right, and I have a couple of questions not related to the goals. Is that all right? May I ask those questions?
Not right at the moment, because we've actually got someone who wants to make some citizen comments that has a time frame that they'd like to meet, and I'd like to give them the opportunity when we get to citizen comments.
All right, I'll ask these questions during council comments.
Yes.
I have one more on this one.
Okay.
And it says audit of services for residential commercial accounts, 46 changed. There was 120 in the city. I'm just trying to put together what really happened there. How come we had 120 accounts that were not, that were out of balance, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
A lot of this just changes over time. Somebody has a house that's a house, and then they turn it into, like, say, a residential care center, so then it actually would shift to a different category. A lot of them are just tracking changes and just making sure we have everything right over time.
And shouldn't that come through our building permit then?
No, they've actually never integrated that. What's happens a lot of times is that there's a whole lot of triggers in the system, so if somebody goes and, like, if building permit does come through electrical and they're doing like an upgrade on the building, then it might be, oh, what's going on now? And then that would trigger a discussion. Then they would go back to utility billing and say, hey, this used to be residential, it should be commercial now, and we track those. But we hadn't done it for a while, and so we got kind of a backlog. I think the idea, like a lot of things, is try to stay on top of it so it doesn't get that bad.
Thank you.
All right, and any report from you?
Yep, and then just real quick, I already mentioned the Power and Light building, and then just another note, the Making Spirits Bright Committee's still working, got a lot of energy there, still trying to figure out what the event's going to look like, the details and everything, but it's nice we got a lot of people involved with that function. So.
All right. And with that, we'll move on to citizen comments. This is a time reserved for citizens to comment on items that are not on the agenda, and we typically do 3 minutes, but I think we only have one speaker, so Paul, I'll give you what time you need to make a presentation.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan, the members of the council and city staff. Thanks for being here. I'll try to actually keep it to 3 minutes, very brief. For the record, I'm Paul Evans. I live at 744 Main Street East, Monmouth. I'm a resident here. I'm also your state representative. Sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing for you, but nonetheless, here to report on something that's going on that I hope will not add to more of a burden, but in fact, long-term provide a doorway for a partnership. The 2017, House Bill 2017, which euphemistically is known as the transportation package that was passed out of the Oregon legislature in 2017, has now pretty much gone into full effect with the transit dollars flowing. As of July 1, I believe it was, the employee tax piece of that statewide was put into effect, and there is more money for transit, both intra-community and inter-community. I say that because right now, there is a convergence of opportunities that my office is working with leadership in the Oregon House on to try and present an opportunity that seizes upon those things that are coming together. So, for example, there's been a lot of talk in town for a long time about trolleys, or perhaps better known as frawleys, because they're not going to be on a rail system. They're trucks, but they look like trolleys, so it's fake trolleys. Anyway, I guess they're called Frawleys, I don't know. But they look cool, and they transport people. There is an opportunity that I'm asking for, City of Independence, Western Oregon, and tentatively, subject to conversations with the council, of course, Mayor Milligan was a part of an initial conversation that would put together a proposal by the three governments to basically request money from the legislature that I'm working on setting aside for a comprehensive study in terms of usage and need for transit, as well as economic development opportunities and perhaps even tourism aspects related to it. There's been a lot of good work done so far. Many different people throughout the community have had this vision for a long time. This is the moment now, if we're ever going to work with the Salem-Keizer Transit Board as they are looking to expand their regional scope. It's also an opportunity as Western is looking at construction so that they have a better opportunity to not have to build quite so many parking spaces if we can actually get people not driving, but actually taking transit, and to further connect the Independence, Monmouth, Western Oregon intra-community aspects. I believe that it is time to look at that seriously. So I'm working with leadership to set aside some money that will help pay for this. At this point, I'm not asking the cities for anything other than your involvement. If you can see your way to sign on for that. Once the study is complete, then I think we may have a better opportunity to actually figure out what partners we want to leverage and how we want to move forward as a region. So that's my spiel. Didn't want to do anything without you guys knowing about it.
Right, and to do a little follow-up on that, right now, Independence is working on a letter of concept.
Yes.
For what this would look like, and they'll be getting that to us, so that would be probably the first point where we really need to ask more questions and start to do the decision process.
The goal is if it is, thank you, Mayor, the goal is if it's three government entities, which Western now is a standalone independent university in the system, and the City of Monmouth and the City of Independence as a group, that's kind of how they're looking at trying to put some of the transit dollars to better use so that it regionalizes a lot of the parking issues, a lot of the use of the roads issues, and especially in a community that has so much interconnectedness. I believe that once the study is accomplished, we'll be able to move forward faster than many other communities because the need will present itself. But first, we got to get the study done, and that's the process, and that's what we're asking for.
So a couple of quick questions, John?
What do you expect the study to look like? I mean, what do you want to know that isn't empirical?
Well, thank you, Councilor Carey. The way that this type of process can be funded requires a feasibility study on what type of transit you're looking at, what communities of interest would be utilized, what type of funding model could be utilized. And funding model, for example, if the process was set up so that it tied in to help Medicaid, Medicare folks get to their appointments, if it was tied in to help folks who are right now perhaps at or slightly above poverty line, be able to get to work and not get to work. Those types of connections right now have very high interest among the legislature on priorities for funding. In addition to that, in terms of construction and growth, if a transit system might actually be able to, through a study, prove that it will keep X number of cars off the roads for a while so they don't have to upgrade Highway 51 or Highway 99 for an extended period of time, there's a savings there. If the state, through bonding and other capital construction projects, looks and says, well, we don't necessarily, if we actually can get students based on other models, we don't necessarily need to have as many parking areas, so they can actually, instead of buying more land, perhaps repurpose some of the land that they have. Those types of studies, those type of issues generally are involved in a comprehensive feasibility study like we're looking at. And the goal is, once that's in place and we can show models around the country where it has worked, then once we know what the market is, then we can actually look to see which partners want to be involved. And long-term, what I'm hoping is that there is an arrangement between the three governments that perhaps put it out for an RFP or form a nonprofit or whatever is the most likely vehicle to be able to provide that service, so that the cities don't get in the business of doing a transit, but rather the region has a service that's both for moving people around and perhaps with an additional vehicle or two for tourism activities outside the region that could actually bring other communities in.
And Mr. Mayor, last question. You referenced Independence was drafting a
Letter of concept.
for the study or for the trolley system or whatever it is, because it seems to me you need to have that before there's any concept.
Well,
Yes and yes.
Yeah.
so the concept was to be able to have something visual and tangible enough for us to start to make decision points on. Because right now, it's still kind of nebulous.
In the budget
And they were going to
process.
try and bring stuff down to a little bit more of a information management piece, so then we can start really asking some more detailed questions, and we could communicate between the three of us off of the same, like, outline. So I think that's kind of where it's going. It's not to really drop an RFP at this point, but it's to kind of put a timeline of, we need to do this, 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 and this, based on when the funding is available, when the legislature is making decisions. So it's probably, and that's why it's easier if I wanted to just have this be an introductory and not really, I get the full picture, because we don't have the full picture yet.
Right. Basically, the timeline is this. The governor releases her budget in December. Under that budget, there will be certain areas of interest and priorities demonstrated, especially under economic development or transportation. Concurrently to that, the transit plans for the big package will continue to be reviewed with certain grants and certain areas being looked at, because the way that the funding model was, it was 80% set aside to be given back to communities and 20% for grants for targeted purposes. That's the pot I'm looking at. So in order to optimize that, by the time the budget process starts, January, February, March, when folks on Ways and Means have a lot of time and are not quite into the battles that sometimes occur, I want to be able to have a piece of paper that has the three governments saying, if money was made available, this is something we would do, a study. And then part of that conversation being what the study would try to cover in terms of how it could actually bring the university and the communities together. Beyond that, there's no promise of anything but if money is made available, it has to have a pathway for it to be expended, and I want that with the governments because of the structures and systems that are in place for monitoring and everything like that.
So we're a long ways out from being able to do the study.
Yes, sir.
I mean, because you got a governor's budget in December.
Yep.
And then you begin to work through that, and you probably won't pass the budget until May or June.
If we're lucky.
If you're lucky. And then at that point, funding is available for the study.
But yes, but priorities right now are already stacking up.
Yeah.
So the sooner we get
Gotcha.
there,
Okay,
firstest
yeah, sure.
with the mostest,
Sure.
with the 30,000-foot vision, and again, I can't emphasize this enough, three governments working together,
yeah.
perhaps Dallas at some point as well, for a feeder piece for that. That regional look can get us into both the transit pot as well as actually the tourism areas. There's something coming about that's not quite a tourist district, but emphasis on regional tourism that I think would actually be another pot that we could leverage.
Thank you.
So, very beginning, but I just didn't want anybody to be surprised or not know.
Yeah. Royal?
Yeah, I got two deals asking on this thing here. So it's actually a 2-year program. Once it starts in December, the money comes available and however they spend it. So you're looking at the next biennium budget is what we're really looking at for this study to start. Because if it's passed in June or July, I mean, this budget's for 2 years, basically. So you're looking at 1 to 2 years on the study part before we get an answer back. And then my last question is, and I'm looking down the road quite a ways, then you were talking about, we get it running, get it going, then we have to create a tax district then to support this afterwards?
No, in fact, great question. Part of the feasibility study is seeing what's available right now. I have a sneaky suspicion based on some investments we've made in healthcare and in access for housing and some other programs that there actually is money to sustain a program that transports people to and from in a way that is necessary. Because one of the issues that has really confronted folks looking at housing and the challenges with, quite frankly, meeting the needs of working families is that we have for many years put housing far away from where they actually need to work. And there are monies available and a priority to try and make that seem easier. And this, I think, could, again, it's going to have a lot of different pots feeding it, but the goal is to not have a taxing district. The goal is to have an organization that can leverage already in existence funds for basically optimizing transportation opportunities through a centralized process.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and I really appreciate your adjustment on the calendar. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here.
And so let me finish, any other citizen comments? Hearing none, we'll move on to the business agenda. And this is to adopt a resolution providing for diagonal parking of motor vehicles on the north side of the 200 block of Jackson Street East. And this is Director Cooper.
Thank you, Mayor Milligan and members of council. Indeed, this is another request for diagonal parking in the downtown core, but also adjacent to the Main Street Park Amphitheater. The adjacent property owner, New Life Ministries, who had purchased the old police department, had come to me and requested our consideration of that, converting some of that 200 block of Jackson into diagonal parking. We evaluated it. The north side of Jackson Street is the side that produces the maximum number of additional parking spaces, and that being 7 additional parking spaces. There's a image included in your staff report that shows the location. Both myself and the police chief have looked at the proposal and are in support of it. Staff is still out painting pavement even at this point, so should council decide to approve and move forward with this resolution, we would be able to proceed with painting those diagonal spaces in August here before the end of the season. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any additional questions that you might have.
I have a question. When we approved the sale of the building to the church, I noticed that the parking was probably going to be enough to accommodate the pastor and about half the choir. But I was told that additional parking wouldn't be necessary. Are these additional parking spots for the rest of the choir?
All I can say is that okay.
Yeah, they actually did have a parking requirement, and I don't remember exactly, they either got a parking variance, or I think the other option is they could have utilized like one of the bank's parking lots to round out their parking, but whatever they did, it met our standards.
And the neighbors have all been involved in this, the people who live nearby?
No, we have not. We've not contacted.
Okay,
neighbors.
thank you.
Russ, so these two, I see 2 structures on the 200 block, I guess the south side. Are those like multifamily units, or are they residential units, or what? What are these 2 buildings here?
On the south side or the north side of
the south side. So the north side's the church, and then there's some apartments.
Some large multifamily, yeah.
Right.
So on the west corner, the corner with Knox, that is multifamily. And then on the east corner with Broad Street is just basically a single-family resident that has been used as a rental, but not for a long time.
Right. Is that the one that's been condemned? Or it's in pretty bad shape, needs to be, okay.
There's 2 units there. There's 2 units there.
And then, sorry, is the width of that street there, is it similar to the last one we did where it's, not really going to impede?
Yeah, thank you, great question. Yeah, there's additional, that stretch has an additional 5 feet. It's 45 feet from curb to curb, so it does leave plenty of space for diagonal parking on one side and parallel parking on the other.
John?
One of the, I have concerns about this. I can tell you, I'm going to be a no on it because the 7 spaces that we're going to obtain by narrowing that major access to the university will be used on a regular basis by the people who live in the apartments. And on an occasional, I suppose on Sundays, those spaces that are not occupied by apartment dwellers will be used by the church. A few days during the summers, there may be, if anything is left from all of that, will be used by the people going to the park. Because that's a major east-west, and I don't know the technical term in our transportation plan that we're going to be looking at, having commuted up and down that street for 25 years, there's a hell of a lot of traffic on that. And it is a major access point to the university. If we ever decided that we wanted to find ways to improve bicycle access, that would be one. This one or Warren, I think, would be one that we would select on an east-west deal. I came around the corner up over here by the church up there on the, what is that, Jackson and Monmouth Avenue, and a big F-350 pickup was parked there in a diagonal zone, and certainly was able to get around it, but it was out there. It was crowding the lane. I'm concerned that if for only 7 spaces, if we're going to be crowding that. And I understand we probably meet minimum requirements. I'm sure we do. This is a little different than a side street adjacent to our main street. And I think we had some business interests that had a particular, both up here and over here, and I was a no on the diagonal on Knox, but I just don't see people running up and down that and backing out into traffic. I'm not a fan of diagonals. I don't think we need it in that area. That's just my opinion. And thanks for doing the good work on it. I mean, we've got a nice layout of what it would look like. I personally don't like it.
Yeah, if I can speak to a couple of those points. The 100 block of West Jackson, we already have diagonal parking there.
Yep.
Which, and it's a similar asphalt width there, so it's there. I'll just throw that out.
That's the one I just had to go around the 350.
Correct. Mm-hmm. The actual roadway classification is the same as Knox Street, adjacent to the park there. And then, can't even read my own note.
You will, and come back to it.
So I'm going to get Royal and then Roxanne.
Yeah, well, I'm a real user of Jackson Street, and I was really interested in the Knox Street, or, to the diagonal parking there, was in the one clear up on Jackson, the 100 was already in before I was here. I just think it's too much of an arterial. There's too much chance of people backing in. Students are going to use that during the weekday. It doesn't make any difference. They're going to use it. Every time there's an opening space, you get that many more people parking. And I don't mind it on Knox and Warren, because they're secondary streets. I mean, people are traveling at a slower speed. They know what I'm talking about. There's no stop sign from 99 clear up to Monmouth Avenue, and they get flying pretty good along there. I'm afraid that'll be quite a traffic impairment for there. Sorry, I just think that's not the place for it. This was a decision that the church made when they bought the property about the parking, and said we had nothing to do with it. So I'm with John. I'm totally against the diagonal there. I just don't think with the amount of traffic that's on Jackson, and I mean there's a lot because I spend a lot of time up there, that Main Street's a different story. People stay off Main Street, they go Jackson, because all the crosswalks and everything on Main Street, they'll pull off Jackson. I'm just not buying it.
Roxanne?
So I have two things. I'm assuming there's no time limitation on these parking spots. And secondly, have we done a utilization survey so we know how many people on a daily basis are using the existing 9 spaces? Since there was a concern of, them being used by the people that live in the apartments, do we know?
No formal study.
Anything anecdotal that can help us?
The multifamily apartment complex fills up most of those parking spaces on the north side of them.
And should we assume that you're still opposed to back-in diagonal parking?
I won't say that it's my opposition. That's more, I'll use the term anecdotal, and in speaking with other folks that they're opposed to it.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I want to say that I use that street fairly often myself, and kind of contradictory to Royal, I think it would be helpful that it would calm traffic on that street and slow it down a little bit. My concern is that it is a long stretch without a stop sign, and people do get zipping through there, and it's hard sometimes for people to see who's ripping along. And I think that if we put those diagonal, it narrows it down. If you'll look at the picture here, you'll see that the block that's east of Broad is narrower, and then it gets wider in this block, and then it gets narrower when it gets to the park. So it's already got a wide, narrow, and I think if we were to put in the diagonal parking, it narrows that block, which is, again, is another calming aspect to what's going down Jackson, because, and that's always been my fear. We haven't had any accidents that I know of along there, but it would be nice to slow it down and make sure that we don't, is my thinking on it. So, Byron.
Question on the, and maybe this is for Scott. Let's say we put these spots in there, and then to John's point, we, in the transportation plan or whatever, we decide that we want to funnel bikes and peds through there, and so we need to repurpose this. How, is there any obstacle to then taking, other than, pissing a few people off, is there any obstacle to then taking those out and repurposing it to something different? Okay.
And speaking of bikes, that was my note. In the transportation plan, Main Street is the identified bike route east-west from Stadium Drive through to Independence.
Sure. Yeah, and I think that's probably one of the reasons, one of our goals next year is to review our transportation plan, to revisit that.
Okay. Yep. And I wanted to just mention this. I brought it, the Public Works had purchased that traffic data collector to get a sense of what is speed doing and volumes. And I'm sorry I didn't compare volumes with other streets, but I did want to mention, and I'm not going to build a case on one set, 1 week of data points, but as far as vehicles exceeding what they call excessively exceeding the speed limit, which is 10 miles an hour over the posted speed limit, less than half a percent are in that range. 17% are in that 5 mile an hour over the speed limit through there. The diagonal parking does have an effect on people, lots of drivers to kind of raise their awareness, and they do begin to slow down. So I just thought I would bring that up and just share that little bit of information. If we wanted to have a better study, I would want to have more than a 1 week data set as far as speed and volume.
That's not compelling data, though.
Nope.
That doesn't suggest we've got a speed problem, so we don't need to calm it, if I heard you right.
Correct. And yes, exactly. That's basically what I was trying to communicate. Yep.
Well,
Yeah, well, I'm the bike rider, and I ride that a lot. Main Street, you can't ride a bicycle on, I don't care which city. Honk that, run off the road, everything else on Main Street, because you have to come out for every corner. So I ride most of my time either on Clay or on Jackson when I'm making time. I do not like cars backing out when you're riding a bicycle, because most of them can't see you. And that is a nice bike area to ride. Up on the 100 block, if you're on a bicycle coming down that, people honk their horn, they can't get around you, they got to go in the other lane. I just think that needs to be left as a thoroughfare straight up to the college, because when the college starts, that'll be the main, even though you don't want it to, that ends up being the main drive other than Hoffman Road coming in. That's the way I look at it.
So, any further discussion? Do I hear a motion? This would be Resolution 1872.
I'll move that the Monmouth City Council adopt Resolution 1872 allowing for the installation of diagonal parking spaces along the north side of the 200 block of Jackson Street East.
And I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
Just a comment I have here, I think, and these are, very valid concerns, with the speed on the one hand, yeah, there's not necessarily a speed problem that we have to solve. That also indicates a lower risk of accident because people have apparently demonstrated some level of responsibility coming through there. And I think that if it does create a problem and identify a problem, this is a bell that we can unring at some point without, with council consent. So I'm not worried about the church and their needs or anything, but I like the idea of adding some parking spots for the Monmouth City Park and all the activities that we have downtown. So that's my 2 cents.
John?
I think this is a solution in search of a problem. I think that these will likely be taken up by people that are already there, and so there won't be any net gain on that. I share the interest in more access to park and so forth. It doesn't help the business community over on Main Street. I think we're going backwards if we're finding ways to narrow our streets. I understand the culming and all that, but I just didn't speak well to find ways to narrow the streets that we have. And, you're right, we can unring the bell, I suppose. It's difficult to do, but we certainly could, but, that's all.
Laurel?
And your point is well taken, but I really, really would like to avoid solving this problem after someone's been injured or there's been a crash. John and Royal make very compelling arguments against this.
All right, any other? No.
The process.
Okay.
Is there a place in here for citizen input on this at all?
No, not tonight.
Oh, okay, thanks.
And any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call please, Phyllis.
Counselor Beltz?
No.
Counselor Schinkel?
Yes.
Counselor Carey?
No.
Counselor Sharmer?
No.
Counselor Johnson?
No.
All right, and that motion fails. And thank you.
Excellent discussion.
For your work, appreciate it.
One point here, did you call for citizen comments on this agenda item?
No?
Would it be possible to let our resident speak now? Even though the vote's been
No, because we've already
taken.
made the decision.
I'd like to hear what he has to say.
I support that decision.
No, thanks.
Any reasons?
All right. Moving on, item 3 is the second reading and adoption of ordinance adopting comprehensive plan map amendment and zoning code 17-01.
Could I just ask, they're under the business agenda, there was 1, 2, and 3. Are we missing something with 2?
No,
Or was it an
the
error?
auto,
I just wanted to make sure we weren't missing something. Thank you.
It's the secret agenda.
Yeah, it's a secret item.
We all got it, but you did.
Oh, I'm the newest one, I
Phantom
don't
number
get it.
2.
Thank you so much.
It's the new
Auto
Hazy.
numbering.
Phantom
Hayes, the new guy.
So this is, I'm just going to go ahead and read it, and then we'll get into discussion. So this is an ordinance amending the Monmouth Comprehensive Plan Map designation for certain real property located in the 9,000 block of Hoffman Road, being a 32-acre portion of Assessor Map Number 8419, Tax Lot 107, from industrial to low-density residential, and amending the Monmouth zoning map designation for said property from general industrial to low-density residential, and this would be ordinance number 1382, and I declare it's passed its second reading. And so, Director Duffner, did you have anything to say, or?
No further comments. We've had both public hearings and
Okay.
provided notices required, so this is...
So, okay. Any council discussion?
What was the ordinance number?
1382.
So we can discuss, I'm going to move to adopt ordinance 1832, an ordinance adopting comprehensive plan map amendment and zone change 17-03.
I'll second that.
Okay.
You know, we had good conversation about this, when this came up. To me, it was clear that, in my opinion, the neighborhood has changed, and in the interest of creating more housing inventory, especially housing inventory that would allow pedestrian and bike traffic to and from schools, K through 12. I think this is a good good legislation here, a good piece of work.
Well,
Yeah, and I've been for it because we haven't, in 40 years, we haven't developed anything out there anyhow. And we built a school there, so, I mean, I hate to lose the industrial area, but you would have a tough time putting industrial next to a school. And so this is a good development to create a neighborhood, and we will create all kinds of walks, parks, and everything else in this zone for citizens of the city. Thank you.
any other comments? Hearing none, roll call, please, Phyllis.
Counselor Carey?
Aye.
Counselor Velds?
Aye.
Counselor Sharmer?
No.
Counselor Johnson?
Aye.
Counselor Schinkel?
Yes.
And that motion passes 4-1. And we'll move on to council comments. And Laurel, I think you had a couple things you wanted to bring up.
Refer to my colleague here. I'll let her go first.
Okay.
So I'd like to let the council know that yesterday there was a meeting of a group of citizens. They met with Region 2 representatives from ODOT to initially discuss a number of transportation issues. One of the things that came up was rapid rectangular flashing beacons, RRFBs. And so since that meeting, I was contacted by 2 individuals that work for ODOT that would like very much, and I believe this is a very good idea, they would like to have Sonny Chickering, who is an ODOT engineer, if I remember correctly, I might be saying.
The Region 2 manager.
Excuse me, Region 2 manager, thank you. As well as some of his staff and city staff and some representatives from Monmouth City Council to find some solutions to a number of the key transportation issues that are happening here in Monmouth. And it just seems like a great opportunity, given that there's been quite a few times where someone from ODOT has made a presentation to us, and we haven't really had that opportunity to have a good open meeting and some open dialogue. And I'd just like to bring it to council's attention that they're asking for this meeting, and I would really like to find a way to meet with them.
Okay, so
Thank you.
we can have Scott coordinate that.
Thank you, and I'd be more than happy to be part of that, given my work and my work on council.
Yeah, I'll just comment, it'll be interesting, because they've been hardcore, dead set, not budging, so this is intriguing now that they want to talk about something that they've dug their heels in for about 3-4 years.
Perhaps with, as individuals at ODOT change and individuals on council change, perhaps now's a great opportunity for us to accept their open door invitation.
Just real briefly, is this a open discussion on transportation issues in general, or in the rectangular, specific to the rectangular flashing
It was
crossing mark?
specific to safety issues, transportation.
Safety issues in transportation,
Okay,
yes.
that
So it's not
would
just, but
be part of it.
Yes.
that was the impetus of the open door, was someone had mentioned about the rapid flashing, and then I have a whole string of emails back and forth, and I had several conversations today about there are bigger issues here, so let's talk about safety, let's talk about the corridor. And as I said, I'm just so happy that they opened the door and said, let's talk.
So this will be about safety only, basically, then?
Well, I think rather than us deciding what it's going to be about right now, I really would love for the city manager to be able to open that conversation, and let's find out what they want to talk about. Let's talk about what we want to talk about. And again, I'm assuming it'd be a public meeting, so other folks that might have some issues and concerns or thoughts could also let us know
Yeah,
what they think.
let's be sure we invite the parents who are concerned about their kids crossing 99 after school.
Absolutely.
It'll be a public meeting, so.
Yeah.
Good, thank you. Thank you very much.
Would be good.
Any other council comments?
I have a couple questions for Scott. How are we doing on progress toward alleviating the financial burden for Monmouth residents who can't afford to repair the sidewalks that have been damaged by city trees?
Russ and I initiated a conversation on how to present kind of transportation dollars, how do we slice and dice that, and hopefully we can have it maybe at the next meeting, but at least the second meeting in September.
Okay, so when I have individuals contact me, what should I tell them? When they say, how are we doing on this? I'm really worried, I'm really nervous. Where am I going to find the money for this? What should I say to them?
The council is still having a discussion. We haven't got to it yet.
But there are things in the works, it sounds like.
Yeah, we're
Right,
progressing,
we're
but
working on
it's one of those ones, it's the same thing. It's hard to just drop everything we're working on and insert the
We
new
understand
project
that.
into the mix.
Okay.
And I think we explained that at the last meeting, too, that we,
And there's a good timeline here, because most anybody that needs some more time, we've been pushing those out, so it's not immediate on their side.
Okay, and then the people who've been given been told that they don't have to do it right away, they aren't going to get a second letter right away saying, why isn't your sidewalk fixed?
Yeah, well, I mean, we would check, and if anybody needs an extension, we would, but typical
Okay.
process is we have
Okay.
a timeline, like anything, and if you're not there, you see if you need extension,
Okay,
and we go
all
from there.
right, good. And then, second question, I happened upon a discussion on the Independence Monmouth Facebook chat group about our clock, which seems to have vanished. And I was a little bit concerned about one person who said that he had been invited by the city to come and take a look at the clock, and he runs or operates a 3D printing company, and he determined that he could print out the, which is kind of a funny way to say it, print out the bushings that were in need of repair for about $350. And if it needed a motor, that would be maybe another $100. But he said when he called to put his bid in, nobody returned his call. Do you know what happened there?
Yeah, we talked about that. I think our concern there was that was a possible fix. We didn't know if it would be actually a fix. And when the sign company got in there, their perspective was there was a lot more wrong with the clock than just a bushing. And so that's where we came with the higher bid. So there's a good chance that we would have went that route. We actually put in a temporary bushing, and that's where we got the temporary. That could have been a potential fix, but we thought it was a low probability that it would actually hold. So that's when we came to the council and said, if we really want it fixed all the way, here's what it would take, and then options for replacement.
Okay, thank you. And then the third thing is, happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday, Phyllis and Royal. Happy birthday to you. And many more.
Royal.
right, I have two questions and a comment. It's actually a comment. With this 119-unit apartment building we're going in, we talked when we first brought it into the city, into the urban growth, and we changed from to low to high density, for the deal. And we talked about parking, and I guess the parking has been increased. Well, I haven't seen the plans, but we didn't know that this was going to be a low-income housing. And how does that affect our tax structure?
It means there's a structure there, and it's going to have calls for service, and they're going to use services, and we will get no tax revenue.
For how many years?
Permanently.
That's not a 7-year like the one in Gun Kaboom?
Nope.
So probably have $1.5 million investment there. I'm going to say for 119, maybe $2 million. So we get SDC funds, which we know that because at the building.
Yeah, so they'll pay
we
building
get
permits.
no
SDC.
support for that 119 forever to help pay the police and our general stuff. So I guess on that same question, how did that get through without us knowing about it before it was done? I want to know so we can stop this the next time. I mean, you don't have a good rapport with the county, they just went ahead and did it without contacting us within our own city? I mean, that's what I'm trying to get ahead on.
So yeah, the basic sequence was there's a state program that funds this. They actually got a substantial investment on this for the project. And actually, it's a lot more than $1 million. It's like multi, but, and so the state process was, I think and I actually ended up talking to one of the board people that actually is on this housing advisory board after it came to my light and everything, and she said they used to apparently have a process to notify taxing entities. Then in an effort to streamline the process, they decided just to go to the county and let the county say yes or no. So in our case, they followed their procedure. They called Polk County. Polk County said, yeah, that's fine. And then where I caught wind of it was another housing entity. There's been an agreement in Polk County for a long time that if you do a low-income housing project, it is not tax exempt.
That's Polk CDC.
Yeah, right. Polk CDC checked, and so that was where I was flagged to me. They said, hey, we just saw this thing come through. Do you know about this? And the answer was no, since no one told us. And so at this point, I sent a letter off to the county commissioners expressing a concern that decision was made without our participation anyway. Check with the state. There's no procedure to do anything. So at this point, it's done. There's nothing to do at this point. I've also flagged the issue with our local COG and League of Oregon Cities, because if Oregon's going to get more aggressive with housing, these things are going to happen again. So there's going to be another city and county and fire district and rec district and whatever, this is going to happen to them again.
And school doesn't get taxes off that either, do they?
And I did talk to the board member. They indicated that that's a reasonable discussion they should be having. Should you really just not contact entities? And so, yeah, so at this point, it's completely done. There's nothing to be done.
And we could have stopped that at the beginning, couldn't we? If that could have been one of the deals that brought it into the city.
I don't think so. Oh, are you talking like when we were rezoning?
Yes.
Yeah, well, at that point, that was just a zoning decision. We didn't know what was going to go.
We could have stopped it at that zoning too, though, if we didn't, if it was known that it was going to be a non-taxable, we weren't paying any taxes, we could have stopped the zoning at that point, right?
Maybe, but that would have been questionable standard to apply to a zoning decision.
It'd bring it out in the open.
Seems as if you're.
I would say you couldn't have denied it on that basis.
Yeah.
Could not have.
Because tax revenue is not a land use criteria.
But we could have denied it on.
You could have denied it on, on other grounds.
There's all
yes.
kinds of other.
Oh, yeah, but not on the basis it's going to be low income.
But we didn't know, what I'm trying to say.
No, I don't, yeah, no, you didn't
I'm trying to
know.
get a point where that doesn't happen again.
Yeah, and
Because that's a big tax burden that we lost again.
Oh, it is. Yeah, and just at a different level, zoning's always tricky, and I've seen this happen many times, is that somebody comes in with the project, and they say, we want to come here. There's nothing stopping them from flipping it to somebody
Right.
else. And I've seen cases, particularly like industrial, where it's the nice, happy, invisible industrial plant, and they get it rezoned to industrial, then they sell it off, and then the big stinky plant comes in behind it or something, so.
Once it's changed, anybody
It's
can
hard.
do it.
That's always a hard thing, because you're setting a zoning standard, you're not setting what specifically can go there.
And Scott and I had some conversation around that, and we started looking at the services that the residents within that housing would be purchasing, so power and light, water, the services that they buy in the community, groceries, and medical and all that there really is, maybe it's not equivalent, but it reduces the impact of it just being completely tax exempt, because we do have that, it's the only way I can equate it is it's to the university. The university has benefits for us, even though they're tax exempt. This housing unit will have benefits for us, even though it's tax exempt. So it's not a complete zero. There'll be some coming back to us.
At a broader level, it should help the housing market. If those people are going to get housed here, that's a good place for them to live, a little more affordable, and then that hopefully takes pressure off of, other housing units. It was intriguing how things have changed. It used to be back kind of 70s, 80s, in lieu of taxes were real common when you did these projects, and that seemed to fall out of favor over time,
Well, at the next meeting, could we have what would it cost us in taxes? For the total cost of that building, what it costs us, we lose in taxes. Because I look at the store deal like you do, There's no market, they'll just be going to little stuff. Far as medical, we only have one medical place in town, really. They're gonna be going outside of the community, outside of our community, get grocery stores outside of our community, groceries. I'm like John, I want to see a return on when we make these changes that we benefit from it as a city. And I understand the idea that we put them in there, but who pays for the police? 119 units going to take some police patrol. I don't care who you are. That's a lot of people in one area that they're it isn't like the college where they have people wandering around looking. They have nothing there. But I just like to see that next time.
I want to kind of get us away from council comments, turn it into work sessions. So I'll take your comment, Byron, and we'll...
It's editorial anyways.
Okay. So, do you have another comment?
I have another comment.
Okay.
And this was, when we were at the work session the last time, and I want to bring this up, is that the city manager brought up the article on the portable basketball hoops. The gal, Karen Jones, brought all the information to us, presented it to us at the work session, went and sat down back in the audience, and then Curtis Cole came up and sat down, and he just stayed there. I mean,
I asked him to leave.
No, you didn't. He's just like he was in part of the group. That's your job, Mayor, is to please ask him to...
I asked him.
Well, you didn't say it very loud, because he just kept right on sitting there and introducing the comments. I'm just saying, we have so many things to change that I can't keep up with what's going on half the time, because one deal, we're strict on one thing and we're loose on the next. So I'm just saying, that's my comment. That person, Mr. Cole, should have been set down in the audience, and we could continue on with our discussion. Thank you.
And to that end, may I invite you to take your gavel to the work session so that if the people who are speaking start to insult someone else in the audience, you can bang your gavel, call them out of order. Mr. Cola said that Ms. Jones was the worst thing that ever happened to their neighborhood, and I would have had my, that's if that doesn't call for a gavel, I don't know what does.
Well...
So, there it is.
Okay. So now that I'll just keep my mouth shut. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Adjourned.